Hi, I'm Todd Henderson. Today we're going to install airbags from Airlift on this 2016 lifted Ram 2500. Now, this is going to be featuring the 5000 Ultimate Series airbags. It's also got the heavy-duty motor and the wireless air module. Now, if you have any questions about the product, click the info button or visit the link in the description. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so now I've already got this truck up on a lift and I've got the tire off. You don't necessarily have to do that to do the install. You can definitely use jack stands and floor jacks. You don't have to take off the tire. I just got this set up so you can see it better on video. Now, this truck also has been lifted, and with the lift kit, it's got a lift kit. The lift kit came with a jounce bumper extension bracket. So what that does is that actually makes this geometry the same as if it was stock. So I don't necessarily have to do any kind of modifications with the airbags. I can just attach directly to the jounce bumper extension. But that jounce bumper first has to come off. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off right now. All right, next we need to attach to that jounce bumper bracket the upper plate A. Now, upper plate A is going to look a lot like upper plate B. The best way to tell the difference is up in the corners. Upper plate A is going to have a hole that's round, and upper plate B is going to have a square hole. So we're just working with upper plate A right now. All right, now this is your passenger side, and you're going to want to line this bracket just like so. And we're going to now put a couple of bolts through this oval hole and this smaller round hole. We're using our 10mm bolts going through, and the large hole should be to the outside of the vehicle. Now, normally we would just be fastening these directly into the factory threaded weld nut, but we don't have a factory threaded weld nut here, so I grabbed some hardware, some M10 hardware, got a washer and lock nuts for both of those. I'm going to go ahead and tighten those down now. All right, now we're going to go ahead and build our airbag tower. We're going to take our B plate, this is the one that's got the square holes in the corners, and we're going to line it up to the holes on the airbag. Right after we put a roll pan on top of that, the roll pan is going to line up to the threaded holes on the airbag, as well as allow for the opening on the top. Next, we're going to take our threaded elbow, it's a 90-degree elbow. We're going to turn that on there to where it gets finger tight. And once it's finger tight, we're going to turn it one and a half more turns with a wrench. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our plate. We're going to fit it on top. Make sure everything lines up properly. And next, we're going to take some of our provided hardware and get that threaded in through the holes in the plate as well as in the roll pan. Now, we're not going to tighten those up just yet. We're just going to get those threads started. Before we tighten it up, we need to go ahead and take one of our carriage bolts. This is the shorter carriage bolt. We're going to slip that in place and set the plate back down. Now I can go ahead and tighten down these bolts here. I'm using a 7/32 Allen wrench. Now that needs to be tightened to no more than 20 foot-pounds. All right, next we're going to go ahead and grab our lower bracket. Now, what we're going to do with this is first we're going to take some of our supplied hardware. We're going to notice we've got square holes on one side and round holes on the other side. So with this orientation, we're going to take our supplied hex bolt, go up through the bottom right-hand corner if you're facing the way I'm facing, and we're going to take a very large washer, a small flat washer, and a nylock nut, and we're going to tighten that down in place with a 9/16 hardware. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take our carriage bolts. Now these carriage bolts are going to come down through our bracket like so. and the square head of the carriage bolts is going to rest onto the inside the square holes of the bracket. Now we're going to take our airbag assembly, we're going to turn it upside down, and we can turn our bracket upside down. We'll take our next roll pan, line that up, and then line this up to the roll pan. Now that we've got these holes lined up, we're going to go ahead and take our flathead Allen head bolts, and we're going to get those started in place. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten those down with our 7/32 Allen wrench, not to exceed 20 foot-pounds. Now this is your passenger side assembly, and it's the exact mirror image of your driver's side assembly. One thing I do want to point out is that this large metal washer is going to be on the same side of the assembly as your 90-degree elbow. Let's go ahead and put it in place. All right, now here's our airbag assembly. We want to make sure that our 90-degree elbow is facing out. Now this is going to sit on top of the factory jounce bump strike plate, and what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this bolt goes in between that mount and the brake line. One other thing I'd like to point out is that this round washer, the large washer, is there to make sure that it's in front of that bracket. So if it's up on top of the bracket, this is in the wrong spot. It needs to be forward of that bracket. That way everything sits right and it positions the airbag in the right place. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and raise your B plate up to your A plate and line up the holes for your hardware. Now I'm going to go ahead and loosely install the corner that's already attached. I'm also going to come over here and install our carriage bolt in this location as well. Then we can go ahead and tighten this up with 9/16 hardware. All right, now because I've got this on lift, I'm going to go ahead and raise the axle with a transmission jack. If you've got jack and jack stands, you want to go ahead and lower the vehicle down so the tires can push the axle up to the airbag. All right, now we're going to go ahead and use our cradle bracket to cradle the bottom of the axle. We're going to install that right through our carriage bolts. We'll get everything attached first, and then we'll start tightening it up. Now, as we tighten these up, we want to make sure we do a couple of things. First of all, they need to be tightened up evenly. Also, we want to make sure that this large washer up top stays in front of the factory strike plate, not on top of it. All right, now we got to go ahead and install our schrader valves for our manual fill. Now this is for emergency use only if something happens with our compressor, but we've chosen to install inside the fuel door. I went ahead and I covered up the fuel inlet so I don't get any kind of shavings inside that. I've got a couple places marked where I'm going to drill through. I've got a 5/16 drill bit, and here we go. Okay, so we're going to start with our schrader valve tubing. I've got that cut in half. Now this portion right here, I've got the first nut installed on there. I've got also a serrated nut that I put on top of there. Now I've got to go up into the wheel well and push this out through the hole to where I can attach it. All right, now once we get them fed through, the progression is first rubber washer. We're going to thread that in place. It doesn't have threads on it, but it catches the threads and it rides up. We're going to follow that up with a flat washer and then the nut. Once I've got that in place, I'm going to use a 13mm socket and tighten the nuts down. Then I just put the valve cap covers on them. Okay, now this is your manifold. The manifold compressor can mount in all kinds of different locations, and you want to select the best location for your truck. I definitely recommend consulting your owner's manual to figure out which is going to be the best spot. I'm going to go ahead and show you what we've selected. I went ahead and marked the area where the holes are going to go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and use some self-tapping screws and put those into place. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and install the compressor. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go from the compressor lead line. We're going to go through about 2.5 feet worth of tubing. That allows that compressed air to cool down a little bit before it goes into the manifold. Then it'll go up into the manifold. So in order to get that installed, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the compression fitting apart on that lead line. We're going to slide that over our tubing. And then we'll fit the tubing up onto the compression fit. Once that's all the way up on there, we take our fitting and we put it back together. And we're going to tighten it down using the 17mm up top and a 12mm to tighten. I'm just going to raise this up and fit it into the intake for the manifold. All right, so this right here is my filter for my compressor. Now I could just screw that directly into the compressor, but I might be dropping a boat down into water. This might get submerged, so I just want to make sure this is going to be drawing from air. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some tubing. I've got a couple of fittings that I put onto the compressor and onto the filter. And what that's going to allow me to do is relocate this filter up into the wheel well. All right, now I'm underneath the fender well. This is actually looking up underneath where the gas fill line is. All right, now that I've got the air filter up inside the fender well, I'm going to go ahead and install this right into the compressor. Okay, now here's our manifold. Now I've got the two sides for the manifold. What I'm going to do is I've got a couple of pieces of tubing that I've cut short. I'm just going to have them coming straight out of the bottom of the manifold. Now I've also got some T-fittings. Now those T-fittings I'm going to put onto the bottoms of the tubing. What this is going to do is this is going to allow me to attach from my schrader valve tubes to the manifold and then go out to the airbags. That way I can fill manually and I can fill with the air compressor. Now, this particular T-fitting, I've put some blue tape on it. This is what I'm going to use on the driver's side. And so what I'm going to do is this tubing here that has a blue tape, I've marked this coming out of the schrader valve. This is the schrader valve that I'm going to use for the driver's side. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this in place and then fit it into the T-fitting. And of course, this one that I did not have marked with blue tape is going to be for my passenger side. Check that one and then cut it to fit. Now I'm going to run the supply from my driver's side T-fitting to my driver's side airbag. So I'll fit that in place, run that to the elbow on top of the driver's side airbag. Okay, now I've got this supply tube coming from the passenger side T-fitting. I've got it marked where I need to cut it, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And I'm going to fit that into the passenger side airbag. All right, now before we start installing our harness, what we're going to do is first establish our ground. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and removed one of the screws, the self-tapping screws that hold in the compressor. I'm going to go ahead and pry that back a little bit and slide my relay back behind that, as well as pull some of the cable going to the compressor, the ground wire for the compressor. That's going to slide back behind there as well. Once I've got all that in place, I'll put the screw back through and then tighten it up. All right, now coming out of the relay, you're going to see with your harness, you got one red wire that's off by itself. It's cut off. That is actually going to go to your motor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip about 1/4 inch of material away off of that. And I'm going to attach a heat shrink butt connector that's supplied with our kit. Next, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the end of the motor wire. Strip a little bit off of that. I'm going to run that to the other end of my heat shrink butt connector. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and heat up the heat shrink and seal that to both sides of the wire. All right, also coming off that relay, right off of the harness, we've got the plug that goes into the manifold. Now we're going to go ahead and push that in place. Once that's pushed in, we also push in the little red tab that locks that in place. All right, now we can go ahead and secure all this out of the way. And the other end of the harness, we can go ahead and run that all the way up the frame underneath the hood of the truck. All right, now I've already connected the eyelet to my negative side. I've connected my fuse connector with a butt-end connector. I've got heat shrink that's shrunk down on that, and then I also crimped down my spade connector on there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ground this out. I'm using a 10mm going to the ground. And now before I connect my fuse to my fuse holder, I'm going to go ahead and attach to, I've got a 20 amp fuse that's in here in the fuse panel. Now that is only alive whenever I've got the ignition turned on. So I wanted to make sure that I found something that was heavier than the 15 amp fuse that goes in here, so I found a 20 amp fuse that's attached to the ignition. I'm going to pull that out. And next in my kit, I've got a fuse connector. I'm going to slide the fuse into that. That taps into the same power the fuse is pulling from. I'm going to insert that back into the fuse panel. Once that's reinserted, I'm going to go ahead and put my spade connector on top of that fuse tap. With that in place, I can go ahead and reinstall my 15 amp fuse into my fuse holder. Now I'm going to go ahead and test my system, check out my airbags, and test for any kind of leaks in the hose connectors. Well, that concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts. We're here to help you out.